Good morning, everyone. I can hear a better, louder good morning, maybe. I mean, it's already 11. Good morning, everyone. Hi, it's really wonderful to be here at this TEDx platform. And I was asked to speak on empathy, and I thought the best way to talk about empathy is really through my life journey and the empathy that I have faced at times and that I have not faced at times, and how it has influenced me, and how through empathy from all of you, you all can make this country a more equitable country, not just for persons with disabilities, but for anybody who's different in any way, really. Uh, so I'm going to start with my childhood. I was born on 1st September 1987, and when I was taken out of my mother's womb, my arms and legs were fully bleeding. I was fractured, and doctors did not really know how to react to this kind of a situation. Uh, Forget ChatGPT. This was a pre-Google era as well. So, you know, medical diagnosis was not really available to the public in that sense, and we all depended on what doctors said. And a lot of doctors really built a great gloom and doom prognosis about me to my parents, including one who said that Nipun is going to live the life of a wooden doll. Another who said that, well, it's worth keeping my life because his neck is straight, but you shouldn't really expect anything much from him. To various others who really, kept telling my parents that Nipun is really not going to count for much in life. My parents were the typical parents in an Indian household who were hoping for a miracle, who were hoping that something normal really happens, or that they start managing to get a normal life in some way, normal as per the definitions of society, of course. And they kept taking me to various doctors, godmen of all religions. They were very secular in nature in that sense. And there's this one photo that I have, and this is the only photo that I have of me standing. And you might think that there's a smile on my face in this particular slide, but it's actually not a smile. It's a grimace of pain because I'm really being forced to stand by basically being tied to this particular disability aid. By this time, my parents knew what my disability, of course, was. It was called arthrogryposis, which basically means that the muscles in my arms and legs were not fully developed, and they would stay like that throughout my lifetime. Uh, but they were hoping for these miracles, of course. But a turning point really came for my parents when there was this one doctor who told my mother that, stop trying to change Nipun, accept him for what he is. Uh, because one thing is for sure, he's never going to deprive you of the joys of motherhood. And I think it's from that moment onwards that my mom made it her personal mission in life to give me a completely normal life uh, despite my disability. The first step towards that was, of course, to send me to a normal school, a mainstream school, an integrated school, because a lot of persons with disabilities at that time used to go to special schools which are segregated for persons with disabilities. But my mom had made a clear decision. She said that eventually Nipun has to face the normal world. So why protect him by sending him to a special school? He needs to learn how to cope with society as well. And I often say that, it's the second best decision that she took in her life. The first, of course, being marrying my father. Uh, there were a lot of struggles to get me to a normal school because schools did not really want to take the burden of having a person with a disability. This was around 91, 92. India's first Disability Act came up in 1995, which was later replaced by the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. But in 1992, there was no legal protection for persons with disabilities. So she went to at least a dozen schools that rejected me before there was this one school that finally decided to accept me. But having got accepted into mainstream school as well, the battle had only begun uh, because most teachers did not know how to interact with me. They either completely ignored my existence or they treated me with sympathy. And when a teacher starts treating you with sympathy and a bichara attitude, that rubs off on the students as well, because students are, of course, observing how teachers are interacting with anybody who's different in any way. And thus, I was completely socially ostracized in school. This is an excerpt from a comic that I had written called No Red Card for the Disabled, where basically what's happening is that I've entered a birthday party, and as soon as I enter that birthday party, all the other students, leave me alone and start interacting with themselves. This, of course, kept repeating throughout my school life, where I had no friends, I was pretty lonely, etc. But I also realized that if I'm not really making any friends, I'm not being involved in sports activities, etc., I have a lot more time compared to my friends. Why not use that to my advantage? And I decided to start studying harder. And soon I started regularly topping school. Now, this was the time of landline phones. I'm sure a lot of you in the audience might not even seen the landline phone, right, in today's mobile era. Has anybody seen a landline phone? Yeah? I can only see the teachers putting their hands up. Of course, you've seen them, ma'am. Thank you. Yeah. So what used to happen is that now all the students knew that Nipun is studying hard, he's topping exams. So one day before an exam, if you want to call up somebody to solve our doubts, Nipun Malhotra is the man to call up. But I was pretty smart too as well. I had learned negotiation and I had learned how to create incentive systems by now. Perhaps that's what inspired me to study economics later in life, because I started giving a list to my mother before every exam of students who were at least cordial to me throughout the year and said, "Agar inka phone aa jaye, so transfer the call to me." But if it's somebody else who's not really spoken to me throughout the year, just tell them that Nipun is busy or he's sleeping or he's out or something. And the students now were incentivized to talk to me throughout the year if they wanted me to solve their doubts by the end of the year. But it wasn't only about academics. I also tried to make the most of any extracurricular opportunities I got. I remember my school also had a huge auditorium, much like the auditorium that you guys have in your school. And we used to have a famous annual theater production at that time. And every year I used to land up for auditions, and the dramatics teacher used to scratch her head and say, "Sorry, Nipun, I really have no role for you." But 3 years passed, 4 years passed, till 1 year she actually gave up and told me, "Nipun, I found a perfect role for you. You are going to be on the stage throughout the play, more than the lead actor, more than the lead actress. Come for rehearsal starting tomorrow." I was super excited. I went back home and started distributing samosas to everybody in my colony. And when I landed up for rehearsal the next day, I realized that she decided to make me a tree on the set of the play, because she thought that ये तो ऐसे ही बैठा रह सकता है on a wheelchair for hours, so he'll be perfect as a tree. Now, a lot of people thought that I'll be disappointed by this, but I actually got pretty excited because this was the first time I was really being on stage. And but the next time I started giving her ideas. I said, "You made me a tree. Next time, why don't you try making me an old man? Because an old man is also on a wheelchair, right? So we'll powder my hair and I'll come on a wheelchair and act like an old man." So I soon started getting roles where my wheelchair became my advantage rather than my disadvantage. And I think that's really how one should look at life. Similarly, when my school started having sports days, but now I was confident to be on stage by the time I was on class 9th or 10th, because I'd participated in plays, etc. I started landing up at the principal's office and following him, forcing him to make me the master of ceremonies. Often I used to end up speaking so much that I used to end up taking time from the chief guest as well, from his speech quota. And that's why, now you know why I love being on stage, and that's why I'm here with the mic. Uh, I, in fact, ended up topping my school in class 10th. I scored 87%. I know it's very low by today's standards because everybody gets 100%, but in 2003, when I graduated from school, 87% mattered. And I was in a lot of newspapers, and I actually told my mom at that time that, "Mom, I'm soon going to be on the front pages of newspapers." 2 years later, I ended up topping the country in business studies, scoring 98 marks, and I was in the front pages of newspapers. And that really taught me that if you dream and if you set a goal, you will accomplish it. So it is important to set goals in life. And I think that's a message that I want to give to all the students here. After that, it was time to go to college. And when I started applying to a lot of colleges in Delhi University, I realized that most colleges were not really accessible. And I think this was the first time in my life that I really took a shortcut. Where, my parents ended up applying to a private college for a BBA and told me, "Nipun, this college is at least accessible. Why don't you go there?" And for around a year, I studied in that particular private college till I realized that I don't want to study for a piece of paper. And, without informing my family as well, one day I just decided to quit that college. And in the next academic cycle, I applied to Delhi University. My dream college was St. Stephen's College. I remember applying to St. Stephen's, going for the interview, and the principal telling me, "Nipun, I love your CV. We really want to have you here. I love your profile. But the economics classroom has been on the first floor for 125 years. We can't shift it down for one person. Are you sure you want to study at St. Stephen's?" I thought for a second before saying, "Yes, of course, I want to study at Stephen's. I'll go up on floor every day." I went back home that day, and I think for the first time in my life, even my parents thought I'd gone mad, because they didn't know how exactly am I going to go up on floor every day. Perhaps I didn't thought through it as well, but I just wanted to study at the best college in the country. Uh, College started. I soon started taking two attendants with me, and I took help from a few classmates, and my wheelchair was actually physically lifted up to the first floor. And this happened for 4 days before the college itself got embarrassed and decided to shift the economics classroom down for me. And and that's when I realized really that, one of the biggest tools to create change is persistence. And I think it was my persistence that I was landing up in college every day that made the economics classroom shift down. My 3 years at St. Stephen's were three of the best years of my life. I made a lot of friends. I was involved in various extracurricular activities, and I really grew as a person. After St. Stephen's, I decided to go to the Delhi School of Economics, and I pursued a master's degree there. And it was towards the end of my second year in Delhi School of Economics that I decided to sit for placements for jobs. And when I sat for placements, I kind of saw the discrimination that persons with disabilities face firsthand. Because whenever I was entering a job interview, it wasn't really my Nipun Malhotra that was looked at, but it was my wheelchair that was looked at. There was this one company that did not even believe my CV and said, "Why don't you get a letter from the principal saying that you're not lying?" There was a second company that said that, "Nipun, we want to test whether you can actually sit on your wheelchair for 8 hours a day." There was a third that said that, "Nipun, we don't have a disabled friendly toilet. You might sue us tomorrow, so it's just safer not to hire you." At that time, I was a underconfident young kid and I did not sue them. Today, perhaps I might actually have. But yeah, uh, these moments really put me into a new low. I locked myself in my room for 2 months. I didn't know what to do. I'd kind of lost a sense of purpose in life. But what I started doing is that I started maintaining a gratitude diary, you know, thanking the stars for whatever is right happening in my world. And when you start focusing on the positives, you realize that even in your worst moments, there are so many positives that you can appreciate. And you start having more empathy towards yourself. When we talk about empathy, I think people talk about empathy towards society, but I think having empathy towards yourself is equally important. And I think that's what pushed me out of the rut and inspired me to start the Nippon Foundation, because I realized that I had lived a privileged life. My parents had given me so many opportunities. What about the other Nippons who do not have those opportunities? So I started a Nippon Foundation in 2012 along with my mother. And one of our main focus areas at that time was to help persons with disabilities get jobs in the corporate sector. And I realized that there were a lot of organizations that were already skilling persons with disabilities. What was lacking was the corporate sector being more open to them. So we did a lot of sensitization workshops, we did accessibility audits, we had set up disability employee resource groups, and one by one, we were trying to change the attitude of the corporate sector towards persons with disabilities. Uh, this slide shows an award that we started as well, where we started recognizing companies that employ people with disabilities. Microsoft came on board as a title partner. There were top cabinet ministers, politicians, etc., who started endorsing these awards. And we were trying to make, corporates working towards inclusion of persons with disabilities cool by creating this gala event where we started recognizing organizations and creating an ecosystem of companies that really are equal opportunity companies in that sense. But in 2015 came another turning point in my life. I was joining a few friends of mine at a pub for a drink. This was on 6th March 2015. I still remember the day because of how humiliating it was. Uh, I was joining a few friends at a pub for a drink. And as I started entering the pub, I was actually denied entry, saying that as a policy, we don't allow people with disabilities inside. I tried arguing with the restaurant manager, but he said, "नहीं नहीं हमारा माहौल खराब हो जाएगा." And mind you, this restaurant was fully wheelchair accessible. Accessibility was not the challenge here. Attitudes were the challenge. I was shocked. I tried taking my wheelchair in, but he actually physically dragged my wheelchair and took it out. And for a person on a wheelchair is, part of your personal space. So I kind of felt violated. It was very humiliating to face this in public, especially when you have your own friends around you. Uh, and I decided to send out a tweet about this incident. And before I knew it, this tweet actually started trending on Twitter. Members of parliament started retweeting it. Media was at my doorstep. A lot of people started calling me up saying that, we face similar challenges as well. It's just that you decided to speak about them. And an entire movement got created around it, which eventually led to the Delhi government calling for an inquiry, which came in my favor. But I realized that this was not just a one off incident at that particular time. We need to create some institutional change. So, what I did is that I actually worked with Zumato, which was India's biggest restaurant aggregator at that time and still is, in fact, to add wheelchair access filters to restaurants, because I thought this would do two things. It would identify restaurants that are wheelchair accessible, firstly, and that is very important. But more importantly, when restaurants start being asked such questions, their attitudes towards disabilities change. And in the last decade, after Zomato has done this, there's been a trickle-down effect on many other apps that have started doing similar things as well. Oyo Rooms, for example, has wheelchair access filters. PVR identifies which seats in the theaters are wheelchair accessible. Uh, there are there are many other apps like Book My Show, which are doing events, etc., that are actually working on making their events accessible and identifying what are the accessibility features in those events. So I think Zomato was a trendsetter for others when it really came to this. And this particular moment also gave me a realization that I cannot work on one issue in society alone, which is employment, if society itself is not accessible for persons with disabilities. So I started working more on policy and inclusion towards persons with disabilities. Uh, the Delhi government gave me an opportunity pretty soon for that, in fact, when in 2015 they announced the odd even scheme. The odd even scheme was a scheme where on alternate days you had to use public transport and other days you could use your own vehicle. Tons of people started writing to me saying that, we are disabled, that is, public transport is not accessible. What will happen about us? I sent various petitions to the Delhi government to no response. I was in fact called by somebody very senior in the Delhi Transport Commission for a meeting as well. But the meeting was scheduled on the first floor of a building that did not have a lift. I think that was bizarre. And I thought I'm going to take things in my own hand and actually went to the Delhi High Court and in one hearing managed getting people with disabilities exempt from the odd even scheme. A year later, the Delhi government gave me another opportunity to really take on a battle when they decided to buy 2,000 buses that were not accessible to persons with disabilities. And I thought this was something which could be very damaging for persons with disabilities because buses are not bought every day and they define the public transport infrastructure of a city for decades. I was again forced to go to the Delhi High Court. This was a 2-year long battle where tons of senior advocates appeared against my case. It was extremely intimidating. Uh, but eventually, again, this judgment came out in my favor. And I'm happy to share that this particular judgment by the Delhi High Court has been historic in nature because a judgment by a High Court or a Supreme Court is applicable throughout the country. And this judgment has actually been used by activists in other states to ensure that buses in these states are accessible towards persons with disabilities as well. Since then, there are many other issues that I've been fighting on. For example, you will be shocked to know that today my wheelchair can get an insurance, but I cannot get an insurance, uh, a health insurance or a life insurance, that is. Is my wheelchair more valuable than I am? I don't think so. And tons of people with disabilities are facing this challenge. So that is one battle that we are fighting. Another thing that I'm fighting on is on GST on disability aids. When GST was introduced, an 18% tax was levied on wheelchairs, hearing aids, braille keypads, etc. That's equivalent to a tax on somebody walking, seeing, or hearing. I think that is ridiculous. Instead, we need to subsidize these disability aids as much as possible and ensure that persons with disabilities can be economic contributors to society as well so that they can pay an income tax. That is the way to go. So we are not really asking for charity, but we are asking for a level playing field. Uh, Along with other people in the disability sector, we organize huge protests and actually manage bringing the GST down from 18% to 5%. But I think 5% is also 5% too much. And I actually have a PL going on in that in the Supreme Court. Uh, I've another recent battle that I worked on is on easing security procedures for persons with disabilities at the airports. I don't know how many of you know this, but in India, if say somebody had a prosthetic, it actually had to be removed in a very humiliating manner by the security when a person had to go through the security. In most Western countries and in most developed countries today, there are technologies called ETD machines through which a person on a wheelchair is not asked to get out of a wheelchair or a person with a prosthetic is not asked to remove the prosthetic, etc. I'm happy to share that in India, that policy has changed too. And today, through ETD machines, people wearing the disability aid can go through security procedures at airports. I don't have much time, so I'm not going to get into all the legal battles that I fought because I want to speak about a few other things as well. Uh, Another important thing that I've been working towards is that ensuring that persons with disabilities get a representation when it comes to uh, policy and politics as well. In 2024, before the Lok Sabha elections, uh, along with VILAC, which is another organization that I work with along with the Penn Foundation, I actually created a charter of demands of, by and for persons with disabilities, where we brought on board 85 NGOs to create this charter of demands, with all of their inputs incorporated in creating this common program. And then we went to various political parties and presented this charter to them, ensuring that political parties as well know that persons with disabilities have a seat on the table, and if they're taken seriously, they can actually become a big vote bank for them. So this is something that I'm working on, ensuring persons with disabilities are really included everywhere in society. And I think that has to start with politics as well. Uh, I've also been working on a lot of thought leadership. Recently, we worked with Zoom on a report on reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities, where we looked at laws across 19 countries to see uh, how do they cope when it comes to reasonable accommodations for persons with disabilities. We worked with NDTV and Hyundai on the State of Disability in India report, looking at where does disability stand in India today and what changes are required in that sense. One of the main things I've realized, and that is why we've started pushing these things, is that thought leadership on disability in India is not prevalent at all. If you go to any university in any of the global countries, there'll be a dedicated disability studies department doing research on disability and the needs around disability. That is a vacuum that exists in India, and that is something that we are trying to uh, fill through Nipun Foundation and WILAC. Uh, this is another slide from another recent advocacy effort that we had on the Data Protection and Privacy Act when it came out and concerns around disability. The reason why I'm showing this is not because of this particular act, but to show to you that disability is such an intersectional issue, right? We recently had the former Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, for example, talk about how he's been struggling to find a house which is accessible for his own daughters with disabilities. Disability is something which is related to education, it is related to housing, it is related to health, it is related to everything. It cannot really be the responsibility of just one Department of Disability Affairs in the Government of India. Because of it, something that we launched recently was a journal called Access Point, where we actually started tracking policies around disability uh, that are happening all across the country, seeing what is going wrong and how can it be changed, what can improve, informing disability sector NGOs, government, the private sector on how disability really intersects with anything else in society. One of the previous TEDx speakers here who spoke before me, Harshita, I in fact co-authored a piece with her recently in this access point on Tamil Nadu and what is Tamil Nadu doing right when it comes to disability, and how we can learn in other states from Tamil Nadu. So I just think that we need to have more knowledge about disability, and that is what Access Point is doing. Another initiative of mine is this initiative that I started called Wheels for Life in 2016-17 that actually connects people who need wheelchairs to people who can donate wheelchairs. Because what I realized is that a wheelchair costs us 5,000 rupees. It's equivalent to a meal at a favorite restaurant for somebody, a pair of jeans, or just a gift you buy a friend, right? But it can be such a transformative experience for somebody. And through the wheelchairs that we've distributed through Wheels for Life, we've actually managed making children go back to school, people become entrepreneurs, and elderly people just walk out of their house after years. So it's been a transformative experience in that sense for a lot of people. That's it. That's about it for my life story, and I think I've already crossed my time as well. So thank you so much, everybody.